Coming up on this edition of Press Watch 2012, journalism versus commentary, reporters versus analysts, how the lines have been blurred between the two sides and what this means for modern media consumers and for the news industry as a whole. Plus, a revisit to the topic of media bias from the perspective of elected officials as well as those in the news business. And later, our bravos and blunders, how one network sheds light on the evolution of political advertisements and how one anchor crossed the line from reporting to advocacy. Welcome to Press Watch 2012. I'm Zach Jacobs. Press Watch is a production of the Mass Communications Department here at Oklahoma City University, and it's made possible by the Ethics and Excellence in Journalism Foundation. We're looking at national news media coverage of the presidential campaign and the news in light of ethical guidelines within the professional journalism community. And to do that, we have our panel. First of all, our honored guest, Emily Virgin, who's a state representative for House District 44 in Central Norman, and Maddie Alexander, who is a double major in mass communications and political science here at OCU. Ladies, welcome to you both. Glad you're here.
Thank you.
Media bias, loaded term. We've got a lot of people who have strong feelings about this from both sides of the political fence, and it's especially relevant with the presidential campaign that's going on nowadays. We're picking up this discussion from last week where we did talk about media bias, but we've got some additional perspective of things. And with the blurring of lines between reporting and commentary, it's tough for many news consumers today to distinguish between the two. So what we did was we had some Oklahoma City residents who gave us their views on electronic media and bias therein, and what they saw as the differences between reporting and commentary. So we have a video about that with some interesting responses. Let's take a look.
NPR is really where I get most of my news.
CNN.
Fox News or CNN.
I watch the Colbert Report.
Probably from the internet.
BBC News. I feel like it's pretty fair.
MSNBC.
From my iPhone, so I guess the internet.
CNN, but I also sometimes watch MSNBC and Fox News.
A news anchor, someone who sits at the front desk.
A reporter is somebody who goes out in the field.
They report the news. Like on Anchorman, when Will Ferrell reports the news.
What a good news reporter or anchor should be is the one who just reports the news. Doesn't give any interpretation of the news.
Well, I would say news commentator, analyst. It's someone who has a good grasp on current events.
Someone who finds news and then comments on it.
They analyze the news and then tell us what we want to hear.
Somebody who is trying to convey news. They're in an objective way, or at least they're supposed to be.
Somebody who, like a news anchor?
A news commentator is someone who talks about the news.
A news commentator is someone who talks after the news have been told by the anchor.
But I think they also interject their own opinion into it.
The anchor is in charge of kind of taking the analyst's information and the reporters and kind of combining that.
A news anchor or reporter is someone who actually presents the news to people, like Walter Cronkite.
I guess an analyst is someone who sort of compiles the stuff. An anchor is more someone who actually communicates it. I'm going to give a goofy example. Stephen Colbert.
Example of the news reporter would be Anderson Cooper of CNN.
An objective, fact-based position where you don't really interject your opinion as much as a commentator. Carl Cameron on Fox News.
Of course it's biased.
Yes.
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 Yeah, definitely.
I think that the national news media is biased. Why is hard to say. I would say a large part of it is just that humanity is biased.
I think everybody is biased a little bit because everybody has their own opinions.
People are going to watch it if it's not agree with them. I mean, that's why Fox has more ratings for Republicans or CNN has more ratings for more liberal standing people.
They try not to be biased, but I feel like they're kind of stating their opinion when it comes to things. So I think they're slightly biased.
I think it has to be biased because most of it's funded by corporations.
They're marketing to a specific demographic.
The MSNBC and Fox News, they are really biased. They have their own agenda to promote one or the other political party. CNN, their agenda is to stay unbiased. We need to know what is their agenda behind them. Is it just to promote progressive ideas, or or to promote conservative ideas?
Very wide range of ideas, lots of bias, lots of confusion on some parts. It's hard for some folks to distinguish between news, analysis, and sometimes fake news, as we just saw. Representative Virgin, what are your thoughts as you watch this video?
I think those are some very observant students that you interviewed there. I think the thing that I would point out the most is that when the students were talking about a perception of bias, I think sometimes that gets blurred with a reporter trying to get the real facts out. And I appreciate when a reporter doesn't let a politician get away with telling blatant lies and saying things that are stretching the truth. And so I think that's another part of a reporter's job, of the media's job, is to really get down to the truth and not just interview people and let them say whatever they want to say. And I think it was another good thing that they pointed out that these are all humans who are reporting and who are in the media, and every one of us has our own opinions and our own biases. And so I think it would be impossible to take all of that out. And I think it would be unentertaining as well. I don't think we would like it very much if we just had people who were talking about the news in a completely unbiased way.
Well, you're talking about unentertaining. Do you think that there would be a drop-off of people watching news if they saw it perhaps less entertaining as what they see it now, the Anchorman reference aside?
Yeah, definitely. I think there would be. When you look at organizations like CNN and MSNBC and Fox, especially with MSNBC and Fox, you have high entertainment values. On both sides, I would say that it's equal. And they're catering to a specific audience who, I think one of the interviewees pointed out that they're telling that audience what they want to hear. And I think that's part of the entertainment value as well, is that the person watching those programs can feel good about themselves and say, yes, I agree with that, and they're validating what I believe.
That's a good point. Maddie, what does this say to you about modern news consumers and modern news outlets from this video?
From this video, it definitely appears that people seek out information that appeals to their ideas. Like Representative Virgin said, it's about people and students seeking out news sources that reaffirm their values. They don't want to hear contradicting opinions. They want to feel good about themselves, and they want to think that what they believe and their values that they hold are correct. And I think that with the students in this video, that they can't differentiate particularly between what an analyst is and what a commentator is, and whether or not that's their fault is really debatable, because the news and the mainstream media has really blurred the line between journalist and commentator. And that's the one thing I actually like to praise NPR for, is because they specifically designate their reporters as commentators or journalists. And I think that's really interesting. And so when I listen to that, I think, okay, this is not entirely news, this is more of their opinion, and that's really interesting, and it's helpful in interpreting the news.
Well, you're talking about news and analysis on the same channel. We've got a video here, a few clips butted together from folks from the two networks that you mentioned, MSNBC and from Fox News. And we have opinion folks and news folks. And I'd like to take a look at that and then discuss after we run this video.
And no time in that have I had somebody come on this show or anywhere else saying, we have to get a Republican health care plan to help uninsured people get insured. You guys are frauds.
We were as disappointed as you are.
Where was the we?
We're pushing them to do
this. Guy's the only guy since Truman with a chance to get a health care plan, and you guys are trying to kill it.
His only press conference was in Mexico in June at the G20, and that was 6 questions, mostly on foreign policy. When is he going to be accessible for questions other than to People Magazine and Entertainment Tonight?
He doesn't have a right to be commit a felony. He doesn't have a right to be in this country.
What? But that has nothing to do with the fact that he was drunk.
He should have been deported. He should have been deported, and this mayor and the police chief didn't deport him.
The president released certain states today from the strict requirements of the No Child Left Behind Act.
What are your thoughts as you see that? You're chuckling. Both of you are chuckling.
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting that that clip showed, I think, probably the most combative reporters or commentators from both of those networks. And I will say, you know, I do not enjoy when a commentator like Chris Matthews doesn't let the interviewee talk at all, and they just argue with him. To me, that serves no point. Why do they even ask someone to come on their show if they're not going to let them speak and make their points? And so I think that's the one thing that annoys me the most about those shows.
Maddie, you were chuckling as well. What was it that that got you tickled about that video?
Just the hostility between the reporter and the guest. Part of journalism and what we learn as student journalists is to act like you're on the side of who you're interviewing and at least be respectful, and that was nowhere near any of that. I think that people want to see arguing, people want to see people yelling, and it's entertainment value rather than actual intellectual news that's really important. And so it's unfortunate to see just arguing and yelling when it has no value.
Yeah.
Well, part of this clip, though, is we had the arguing, the interrupting, and the yelling, but we also had two straight news folks that were on there, Andrea Mitchell and Shepard Smith, who have their own news programs. Do you think, Ms. Virgin, that the shouting and the bickering and the interrupting affect the credibility of the actual news journalists just by virtue or vice, if you will, of being on the same network as those that were raising their voices?
Definitely. I think people like Andrea Mitchell and Chuck Todd's one of my favorites, who's on MSNBC every morning. I think just because of the fact that they work for MSNBC and they work alongside those people who don't let their interviewees speak at all, that definitely I think decreases their credibility with a lot of people. And I know a lot of people who refuse to watch those networks because of shows like the Chris Matthews Show. And so I think those people like Chuck Todd, Andrea Mitchell, Shepard Smith, they really have a decrease in their audience because of those other shows that are on the network.
And Maddie, along a journalistic point, we have a guideline from the Society of Professional Journalists, and it says that journalists should distinguish between advocacy and news reporting. Analysis and commentary should be labeled as such and not misrepresent fact or context. What do you see in this video, in these videos together, that, and how do you bounce that against the SPJ ethics point here?
I mean, I definitely agree with SPJ. I think that news organizations like MSNBC and like Fox should designate between what is actually news and what is just opinion and commentary. And I think that definitely affects our perception of the news organizations, because we think, if I watch MSNBC, I'm going to get the liberal news, and when really you're getting liberal commentary. And the same thing with Fox News, you're not getting conservative news, you're getting commentary. And I mean, I think that they should really take SPJ's guidelines to heart, because they haven't done so, and it's definitely skewed our perception of bias in the media.
I think it definitely has. We're going to pick up more on this after our break, but coming up next on Press Watch, we pick up again on last week's discussion of media bias, but this time we get the perspectives of a national candidate and of two seasoned journalists. And we'll also ask our panelists their views on this subject and what it means for public discourse as well as governance. That's right after this. Welcome back to Press Watch 2012, where we're looking at the national news media and ethics and how it all works during this presidential election. Still with us, our state representative for House District 44 in Central Norman, Emily Virgin, and OCU student in mass communications and political science, Maddie Alexander. Our next block is about bias, but we're also taking the idea of bias from the views of seasoned journalists as well as elected officials. First of all, we have a clip here from a vice presidential candidate, Ryan, who was talking with Chris Wallace on Fox News, and he is talking about what he sees as media and the bias in the media, rather, and what he sees, and he says that other folks see the same thing as well. Let's roll the clip and take a look.
I think most people in mainstream media are left of center, and therefore they want a very left of center president versus a conservative president like Mitt Romney.
With that, again, Republican on what is considered a favorable network, getting an interview from a favorable type of journalist. I mean, Ms. Virgin, I know that you're not in the news media. I know you're more of a news consumer and being an elected official, but you are on the other side of the mic oftentimes in these types of interviews. What are your thoughts on this? Is this done well or not done well enough?
The interview itself?
Or interviews that you might have been a part of in the past. Please share with us.
Yeah, I think that every interview that I've ever been a part of has always been conducted with a high level of professionalism. But I would say that most of the interviews that I've ever done have been friendly interviews. The interviewers have been not those who are trying to refute things that I say. You know, I have had to answer some tough questions, but I enjoy those tough questions, and you know, going back and forth about the positions that I hold and why I hold those positions. And so I think, going back to a point I made earlier, I really enjoy when reporters take someone to task about a position or a so-called fact that they're stating. And I don't think that's commentary. I think that's journalism.
But as far as an elected official's views on media bias, whether right-leaning or left-leaning, is that a common thing that is seen amongst you or amongst your peers?
Yeah, I think in Oklahoma there is, especially in the legislature, with the national media, there is definitely a feeling that the national media is biased towards liberals. And, you know, I don't think that's true. I think maybe journalists in their personal views maybe lean to the Democratic Party, but I don't think that affects the quality of their work. And to say that, you know, a reporter or journalist has to be completely apolitical in their personal lives, I think that's wrong. And they should be able to have a life outside of their occupation. So I don't subscribe to the belief that there is a huge media bias, as a lot of people in Oklahoma believe.
Maddie, what do you see, piggybacking on that topic? What are your thoughts?
I mean, I think that for elected officials to say that the media is biased, it's not about whether the media is actually biased, but when the media is trying to criticize you or trying to find the facts or trying to figure out what you did wrong, and especially with all of these gotcha questions and where you try to trip up the candidate or the elected official, I can definitely see where they can perceive the bias. But at the same time, part of what we learn as journalists is to not do that, because you're more likely to get an interview with someone again if you're nice and you're friendly. And I mean, that explains why Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan only go on shows on Fox News, and why Obama goes on shows that are like late night shows and things like that, is because the journalists and the late night hosts who are not journalists are going to be friendly to them and not hostile, and that's what they want. And
it's kind of like what Andrea Mitchell was talking about in our previous block about getting interviews with People Magazine and Entertainment Tonight. Now, we have a clip here talking about bias, and this is from two very seasoned journalists. We have Tom Brokaw and Chuck Todd, and they're going to, we're going to watch these clips and get their take on what they see as bias in the media. Let's take a look.
I've always believed that the real media bias is geographic. I've always believed that. It is because The media industrial complex is located in New York City. That's why there are cultural biases built into the media. I've always believed that, but it's less political than people think it is.
Is there, with conservatives like myself for years have pointed out media bias. Do you understand why we say that? And I do an example every week. We do Media Mash, and we show the mainstream media in particular.
Right.
And we show examples of just how biased they are.
Well, I think you have a bias to the right, so I think that helps.
I'm the only outspoken conservative here, by the way.
I know, but I do. I think, and I think that Roger, when he put this together, I've known him a long time. Yeah. He knew exactly what he was doing. He knew that there was a big audience out there who wanted to have their points of view reaffirmed on a daily basis or on a nightly basis.
There at the end was talking about Roger Ailes, who is the chairman and CEO of Fox News, and who helped to start Fox News. Actually, that's who he was talking about. Maddie, you see Tom Brokaw and you see Chuck Todd, again, established and respected journalists, and they see bias, albeit from different perspectives and from different sources. What say you?
I mean, I definitely agree. There's a principle that states that people seek out information that reaffirms their values, and when you give people the opportunity to do that, they're going to do so. Conservatives are going to watch Fox News, liberals are going to watch MSNBC, and both people watch CNN. However, it's definitely pegged as being a left-leaning organization, and I think that if you give people what they want, they're going to watch it, and it's all about the ratings, which is unfortunate because that skews the news.
Representative Virgin, what do you think about that?
Largely I think that it's the role of the consumer and the informed citizen to be able to differentiate. And yes, there is definitely a responsibility of those in the media to differentiate between commentary and reporting. But I think it's also the responsibility of everyone as a citizen to fact check these things on our own and say, I like what that person said, but is it true? And so I think that there's far too little emphasis placed on the role of the educated citizen.
Very good points. Thank you both. We're going to come back here after this break, and next on Press Watch, our weekly segment called Bravos and Blunders, the best and worst we've seen in political journalism this week. And we'll examine an analysis on the evolution of political ads, and we'll discuss how an anchor might have overstepped his bounds as a journalist to tell people how to vote. Stay with us. Welcome back to Press Watch 2012. It's time now for Press Watch's Bravos and Blunders, the examples of the best and worst we've seen in journalism recently. And State Representative Emily Virgin and OCU student Maddie Alexander are here with us to share their perspectives. Thank you for sticking around with us. Our Bravo this week comes to us from an interesting video on CNN.com. There's a man named Darrell West of the Brookings Institution, which is a think tank based out of Washington, D.C., and he gave his analysis on the evolution of political ads. Here's a snippet of the video.
This is Senator John Kennedy.
President Johnson.
Jimmy Carter. So it's an amazing lens on American culture and on American politics.
This time, vote like your whole world depended on it.
The biggest difference in ads that we see today is really in the editing. Today, we have a much faster pace. They splice different images together. There's much greater sophistication in the production that lies behind contemporary ads.
Eisenhower answers America.
From that video, we gave it our Bravo this week because it's not hard news, but it's definitely informative. It covers both sides of the political fence. But there's one thing that he said at the end of that video, which is well worth watching. He said, quote, "I think the greatest danger today is infactual inaccuracy in political communications." And before that, he said, it's basically where an ad by anybody, whether it's a political action committee or somebody with a video camera and internet access, can put a video or an ad up, make it go viral, and nobody out there, no fact checkers, no organizations can really keep it in check. Ms. Virgin, how has this affected how you or your peers might run a campaign nowadays?
Well, I think first of all, it makes a candidate very reticent in anything that they say. They're very careful and very carefully scripted. They don't want to get off topic. They don't want to answer questions as they were asked. And so I think that's because, you're always in front of a camera or a recorder, or someone's on Twitter or Facebook. And so any quote that you give is instantly out there, probably for the whole world to see. And so I think that makes candidates less accessible.
Do you think that that has a positive or a negative impact, or even in the middle, on public discourse and maybe governance here in America?
I think, I've seen both the positive and the negative impacts. But I think one of the negative impacts is that candidates are very afraid to give their true opinions on things. They want to stick to their message because they're always on camera. And I think you see that especially right now with the presidential campaign. But I think, with these political ads that are very infactual, the bottom line is that they still work. And for the general public, they're very effective. And so I think until those ads stop working, and until the general public says, we're fed up with this, and we don't want to see these negative ads or these ads with blatant lies in them, that campaigns are still going to run them.
And Maddie, on that idea, do you think that we have passed a point of no return, to use that kind of a cliche, here in America with content and substance of political advertisements?
Ever since Citizens United passed, I would say yes, because that opens the door for super PACs, basically, to take out all of the advertising they want. They have no accountability to the candidate because they are considered independent expenditures. They're not associated with the campaigns. So if Karl Rove takes out a commercial or ad on TV or radio or whatever that's just completely not factual, then the candidate can say, well, they're independent of us, and we're not associated with each other. One of the most fearful ads that I've seen so far is an ad taken out by Americans for Prosperity, and it's entirely in Chinese, and it's set in the future, and it's trying to explain to it's a professor explaining to his students that America tried to put everything on a credit card, and now basically China owns us. And when I saw that, I thought, this is propaganda. This is the definition of propaganda, that you're trying to instill fear in the public. And that's essentially what advertising has come to. The amount of negative ads that have been taken out by super PACs far outweighs the number of positive ads or pro-candidate ads. And that's, it's really unfortunate, and it's not going to stop.
Okay. Well, our blunder this week, good points, by the way, from the both of you. Our blunder this week comes from Thomas Roberts, who is an anchor for MSNBC. And during their daily news coverage earlier, he stepped over the line whenever he was interviewing an LGBT advocate about initiatives on ballots in 4 states. Here's the clip.
Jen, as we look at the research for the 4 states, the ballot initiatives where marriage equality is taking place, is it likely that marriage equality will become a reality in those 4 states?
Absolutely. I think there is no doubt that the polls are trending very favorably in those 4 states. And in Minnesota, they'll be able to beat back this really hurtful, hateful constitutional amendment that just basically tells kids and families who are LGBT in Minnesota that they are different and should be treated differently in the Constitution.
Right. In Minnesota, you need to vote no. In the other 3 states, you need to vote yes.
I see the look on your face.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's definitely overstepping his bounds. Whether he's a commentator, whatever his title is, and whatever his purpose was in that show, telling the public you need to vote yes or no. I think that's just probably one of the most blatant examples of overstepping a reporter's bounds that I've ever seen.
And you're going to see this, unfortunately, on Fox News, MSNBC, and unfortunately happens more often than we'd like. Yeah. Maddie, what are your thoughts on that video?
I definitely think he was overstepping his bounds. Not to say that I don't agree with him, but I think it's inappropriate for a journalist to say, this is how you need to vote. For example, when I write for the student paper here on political issues, I don't specifically say you need to vote yes or no on this. You know, I wrote a column about the state questions, and I basically summed up the state questions, but I don't explicitly say vote yes on this, vote no on this, because it's up to the public to determine that. And you know, it's not, you know, when someone's telling you this is how you should vote, it takes away the public's opinion to decide.
And I would say in this, it might have been putting it nicely, it might have been a poor stab at trying to summarize what the entire interview was about, but it came across as advocacy. Yeah. Ladies, your final thoughts on this show today? Really glad to have you here.
Yeah. You know, I think what we can take from all of this is, as I've said before, I think now, whatever the cause is of a different kind of media that we have now, that I think more responsibility has to be placed on citizens to inform themselves and to take these shows on MSNBC and Fox as entertainment. And to say, you know, these people are telling me what I want to hear, but that may not always be true. And so I think that we have to take the responsibility and you know, educate ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Maddie, what do you think?
Oh, I definitely agree with Representative Virgin. I think that people really need to take mainstream news with a grain of salt, because it's not entirely news, it's commentary, and people need to differentiate between what is opinion and what is not opinion. And if you're a liberal, watch Fox News, if you're a conservative, watch MSNBC, because it's good to have your ideas challenged, that way you can defend them. And I think that society would be a lot better off if people were willing to have their ideas questioned and be able to say, no, you're wrong, why?
Yeah, great point.
Very great point from the both of you. Thank you so much for being here with us. We had a great time. Thank you. That's all the time we have for Press Watch 2012 today. Again, our thanks to State Representative Emily Virgin and OCU student Maddie Alexander for their time and their insight. Press Watch is a production of Oklahoma City University in partnership with the Ethics and Excellence in Journalism Foundation. Our election coverage show is next week. We'll see you then.